Welcome to the debate. Katherine Rose Taylor is, well, she's one of the most brilliant healers at St. Mungo's Hospital. She fixes broken bodies for a living, right? She knits shattered bones, she reverses severe magical maladies, and, pulls people back from the absolute brink.
Yeah, she is incredibly gifted.
She really is. Yet, for the last 8 years, she seems to have been entirely incapable of fixing herself.
And that is the sort of tragic irony right at the center of her life, isn't it? We look at her and we see this immense, undeniable capability.
Right.
But, when you look underneath that polished, professional exterior, you find a profound psychological paralysis.
And that tension is exactly what we are unpacking today. We're looking at a 38-year-old pureblood witch. She is a Ravenclaw who grew up in the just suffocating, incredibly sterile opulence of a high society London manor.
Suffocating is definitely the right word for it.
Exactly. But she managed to break free from that coldness. She found absolute liberation with her husband, Anthony, and then tragically lost him to his perilous work as a curse breaker when they were both just 30 years old.
Right, just a devastating loss.
Yeah. And today, she lives quietly in Godric's Hollow with her teenage daughter, Agatha, all while dedicating her life to healing others.
Which brings us to the core disagreement we really have over her life's trajectory. When you look at her current reality, are we looking at a woman who took the worst tragedy imaginable and somehow forged it into a triumphant, self-actualized existence?
That's the question.
Or, are we looking at a woman who, beneath all that extreme competence, has violently regressed back into the emotional numbness and isolation of her childhood?
Well, I argue that she is the absolute embodiment of triumph. I believe the reality of her life shows she broke the toxic generational cycles of her pureblood family.
Okay.
Despite her monumental grief over losing Anthony, she consciously chose not to revert to the coldness of her upbringing. I mean, she holds on to her authentic, empathetic self, and she proves it every single day through her actions.
I see the outward success, I really do, but I am arguing that her story is fundamentally a tragedy of emotional relapse.
A relapse?
Yes. My perspective is that her unresolved survivor's guilt over Anthony's death has effectively trapped her. She has rebuilt the exact same emotional wall she once managed to escape, and she is simply masking that isolation behind her professional duties and her role as a mother.
Let me start by laying out exactly why this is a triumph. To really understand where she is, you have to understand what she survived.
Fair enough. Her childhood in that London manor was defined by profound restriction. Her mother, Eleanor, demanded absolute perfection. I mean, when Katherine was just 7 years old, her very first sign of magic was making a book fly down from a high shelf.
A classic accidental magic moment.
Right, a moment most parents celebrate. But her mother's response wasn't joy. It was this cold reprimand that the display, could have been more remarkable.
Katherine had to completely suppress her naturally curious, observant Ravenclaw nature just to survive her own home.
We definitely agree on the bleakness of her starting point. It was a deeply, deeply lonely existence.
Exactly. But her victory lies in breaking that emotional sterility. Yes, losing Anthony was a devastating, life-altering tragedy.
Absolutely.
But Katherine consciously chose not to retreat into the useless idleness of her mother, who, let's remember, never even held a job. Instead, Katherine took her family's historical legacy, her father and great-grandfather's renowned work in potion making, and she weaponized it for the greater good.
Weaponize is an interesting choice of word there.
Well, she became a highly proficient healer, and more importantly, she became the affectionate, attentive mother to Agatha that she always yearned for but never had herself. Anthony, who was her Gryffindor opposite, unlocked her true identity when they were young.
He did, yes.
And she honors that awakening by maintaining her caring, empathetic self even in his absence. She didn't regress, she evolved.
I come at it from a completely different angle. You bring up Anthony unlocking her true identity, and you are right. He was free, expressive, spirited, basically everything her mother abhorred.
Right.
But that is precisely where the tragedy lies. Katherine's liberated identity was entirely dependent on Anthony. He was the scaffolding that held up her emotional freedom.
I wouldn't say dependent.
But since he died, that scaffolding has entirely collapsed. I mean, following his passing, she was left feeling profoundly numb, and she became increasingly serious and reserved.
Because she was grieving.
But those are the exact survival mechanisms she used during her rigid childhood. Her extreme dedication to St. Mungo's isn't some healthy evolution. I argue it is a desperate, exhausting compulsion to fix what she couldn't fix 8 years ago. It is driven by guilt, not actualization.
But you cannot separate her outward healing from her inward reality so cleanly. Think about the sheer mechanical difficulty of potion making and magical healing at the levels she operates.
It's immensely difficult.
It is! This isn't just waving a wand and hoping for the best. It requires absolute mental presence, intense focus, and deep empathy for the patient's suffering.
Sure, she's highly skilled.
She is described as exceedingly proficient. She is out in the world actively repairing broken people. How can you look at such a constructive, outward-facing life and dismiss it as just an unhealthy compulsion?
Because competence can be a trauma response. In fact, extreme competence is often the loudest symptom of psychological paralysis.
Oh, wow. You think she's paralyzed?
Internally, yes. I am not dismissing the good she does for her patients. They are incredibly lucky to have her. But we have to look at the psychological engine driving that proficiency.
Okay.
We know her dedication to her patients actively causes her immense internal distress. She feels a crushing weight of guilt for not having been able to save Anthony. It literally keeps her awake at night.
The insomnia, yes.
Right. She suffers from severe insomnia because every single patient she heals is a physical reminder of the one person she couldn't save.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on how we evaluate that guilt. Think of a blacksmith.
A blacksmith? Okay.
Yeah, a blacksmith who uses the intense, destructive heat of a raging fire to forge an incredibly precise, delicate healing instrument. Yes, the fire is dangerous. Yes, the origin of the heat, her grief and her survivor's guilt over Anthony, is painful.
Very painful.
But does that painful origin invalidate the reality of the instrument she has forged? She has taken this trauma loop and turned it into service. Her mother sat in a mansion offering absolutely nothing to the world.
True.
Katherine takes the worst night of her life and turns it into spell casting that physically keeps people alive. That is the very definition of human resilience. The guilt is real. I'm not denying that. But using that guilt as fuel is a triumph of character.
That is a very compelling way to frame it. But, the fire in your analogy is actively burning the blacksmith alive.
I think that's a bit extreme.
Is it? You are praising her utility to society, but ignoring the cost to her own soul. The magic she performs at St. Mungo's is draining her, which explains why she retreats into absolute quiet the moment she gets home.
She just needs to recharge.
Let's look at her current emotional state, though. During her Hogwarts years, she hid away in the Ravenclaw library because visibility meant criticism. She was completely closed off.
Right. To survive, Eleanor.
Exactly. And Anthony taught her that her feelings actually had value. But now, nearly a decade after his death, the defining word used to describe her state is numb.
But numbness immediately following a sudden death is a completely natural physiological response to shock. You can't hold that against her as a permanent character flaw.
It wasn't just the immediate aftermath, though. She remains earnest, serious, and crucially reserved.
Being reserved isn't a crime.
Now, but the numbness has settled in as a permanent baseline. It is essentially a magically induced coma for her emotional life. It keeps the patient breathing, but they aren't truly living.
A coma?
Yeah. Anthony taught her how to feel, and now that he is gone, she has completely shut the system down again. The walls are firmly back up.
Well, I have to push back hard on that definition of her walls. I think you are conflating the pathological, fear-based isolation of her childhood with the natural, protective boundaries of a grieving widow.
I don't think it's just natural boundaries, though.
But it is. When Katherine was young, she hid in the library because she feared her mother's coldness and judgment. Her suppression was born of terror. Today, she is described not just as reserved, but also as kind-hearted and fair-minded.
Yes, she is kind-hearted.
Right. She remains highly observant. Is becoming a bit more reserved after the profound loss of your best friend genuinely a regression to her mother's toxicity? Or is it simply the quiet state of a woman protecting her peace?
Protecting her peace from what, exactly?
From the chaos of the world. She specifically chose to live in the village of Godric's Hollow because it serves as a sanctuary echoing with happier memories of her time with Anthony.
A sanctuary can also be a hiding place.
But a coma implies she is unresponsive to the world around her. That isn't her reality. She built a life in a place she loves. That isn't a prison. That is a protected garden.
A protected garden can still be walled off from the sun. Yes, she is kind-hearted and fair-minded, much like her father Edward tried to be. But she is functionally closed off from new joy, from new connections.
I don't know if that's entirely fair to say.
If her entire emotional existence is just tending to the ghosts of happier memories in Godric's Hollow, she is surviving. She is not actualizing. She has lost the vibrant, expressive identity that Anthony helped her find.
I am just not convinced by that line of reasoning because it willfully ignores the most glaring, undeniable evidence of her emotional accessibility.
Which is?
If she were truly in this emotional coma you are describing, how do you explain her relationship with her 18-year-old daughter, Agatha? This is where the argument of her being entirely walled off completely breaks down.
Agatha is the center of her world. I don't deny that for a second.
Right? So let's connect her internal emotional state to the one place she projects her emotions most intimately. When Katherine was a child, demonstrating magic for the first time, Eleanor demanded cold perfection.
Yes.
Katherine felt profoundly lonely, despite being surrounded by pure-blood wealth. Now, look at Katherine as a mother. She consciously looked at how Eleanor raised her, and she ran in the exact opposite direction.
She definitely did.
She is deeply affectionate, attentive, and loving toward Agatha. You absolutely cannot be emotionally numb and simultaneously be deeply affectionate. She definitively broke the inheritance of coldness. She gives her Hufflepuff daughter all the warmth she never had.
I will certainly acknowledge her success in parenting Agatha. It is undeniable that she provides a significantly warmer, healthier environment than Eleanor ever did.
Thank you.
But, and this is a big but, ironically, her success as a mother actually highlights the internal tragedy I am talking about. Think about how she achieves that warmth.
By loving her daughter.
We know that Katherine actively tries to remain strong for her daughter. Consider the mechanics of what that means on a daily basis.
It means she is a good parent who doesn't burden her child with her own adult grief.
It means she is executing an exhausting, continuous performance. She is completely suppressing her own numbness, her 3 a.m. insomnia, and her crushing survivor's guilt, all to present a flawless, strong, loving facade for Agatha.
Are you seriously suggesting her love for her daughter is just a facade?
No, the love itself is incredibly real, but the presentation of her emotional state is a constructed performance, and here is why that is so tragic. It perfectly mirrors her childhood trauma.
How so?
When she was a little girl in that London manor, Katherine had to act exactly as Eleanor expected, even when she was far from her gaze. She had to bury her true self to fulfill a familial role.
That was out of fear.
Now, decades later, she is once again burying her exhausted, grieving, authentic self to fulfill the role of the infallible mother for Agatha.
Those two situations are fundamentally different.
How? The beneficiary has changed. Agatha benefits from this performance, whereas Eleanor just fed her own ego with it. But the internal psychological mechanism inside Katherine is absolutely identical. She is suffocating her true feelings to meet an external expectation.
I see the parallel you are trying to draw, but you are completely misinterpreting the nature of maternal sacrifice. Acting exactly as Eleanor expected meant stifling her curiosity, her Ravenclaw intelligence, her very magic, just to be a pristine, pure-blood doll.
It was a suppression.
It was a total suppression of her core identity. Trying to remain strong for Agatha is not a suppression of identity. It is an active expression of her chosen identity.
But she is still hiding how she truly feels.
Because that is what a responsible parent does. Anthony helped her find her true self, which was a person who deeply cared about feelings and connections.
Right.
By choosing to shield her Hufflepuff daughter from the absolute darkest depths of her insomnia and guilt, she is not regressing into some pure-blood mold.
She is making an active, empathetic choice.
At her own expense.
She bears the weight so her child does not have to. She is taking the emotional hit so Agatha can grow up in the sun. That isn't a tragic regression. That is profound strength.
But at what cost to herself? You keep pointing to the external beneficiaries of Katherine's actions. The patients at St. Mungo's who get to walk again, her daughter Agatha who gets a loving home.
Because they matter.
And you are entirely right, they benefit immensely from her choices. But our debate today is about Katherine's own psychological trajectory. The fact that she is a highly functional, deeply contributing member of magical society does not erase the fact that she is internally haunted.
Being haunted doesn't mean you haven't grown, though.
But she is 38 years old, carrying the crushing weight of a failure she could not control. She is losing sleep, living in a sanctuary of memories, and missing her best friend every single day.
That's grief.
She may have broken the generational curse for her daughter, but she absorbed all the poison herself to do it. You are looking at the fact that she built a beautiful house for her daughter and ignoring the fact that Katherine herself is standing out in the rain to keep it intact.
And I would argue that choosing to stand in the rain so your daughter can be warm is the highest form of self-actualization a person can achieve after profound trauma.
We clearly view that sacrifice very differently.
I think we do. Let's step back and look at the totality of her life. My perspective remains that Katherine Rose Taylor's life is a brilliant testament to the resilience of the human spirit.
Okay.
She survived a restrictive, emotionally barren upbringing in a high society family that demanded she be nothing more than an ornament. She allowed herself to be entirely transformed by the love of a spirited, brave Gryffindor.
She did.
And when that love was violently and tragically taken from her, she did not retreat into the cold, useless opulence of her mother. She honors Anthony's legacy every single day. She actively chooses to be a healer of maladies, using her family's potion-making brilliance to save lives.
Which is a noble choice.
And she fiercely broke the cycle of generational trauma to be the affectionate, loving mother her daughter deserves. She took her pain and turned it into purpose. It is a triumphant life.
And my summary rests on the deeply complex tragedy of her internal reality. I look at Katherine and I see a woman who was briefly given the key to her own emotional freedom, only to have it snatched away when she was barely 30.
Right.
While she undeniably provides warmth to her daughter and physical healing to her patients, her internal life remains defined by a haunting guilt over her husband's passing. She has been thrust back into the very seriousness, reservation, and quiet suppression she once sought to escape.
You see it as a full regression.
I do. Her extreme competence is a shield she uses to keep the world at bay. She is a phenomenal healer and a wonderful mother. But as an individual, she remains frozen in the grip of her own unresolved grief, unable to heal the one wound that matters most.
I think where we fundamentally converge today is on the profound, defining impact of Anthony. We both recognize him as the absolute catalyst for Katherine's emotional awakening.
Oh, absolutely.
We also agree that her love for Agatha and their shared life in Godric's Hollow serves as the undeniable anchor that keeps her moving forward every single day.
We do. And I think this discussion perfectly illustrates the value of examining character histories through multiple psychological lenses. We so often want to categorize people as either completely broken or completely healed.
Oh, for sure. It's rarely that simple.
Exactly. But Katherine shows us how profound trauma and extraordinary functional healing can coexist in the exact same person, often at the exact same time. It is never just one or the other.
It rarely is. And the source material offers so much more nuance to explore regarding how our early childhood environments set the stage for how we process adult grief.
Definitely.
It leaves it to the listener to weigh the evidence and decide, is Katherine Rose Taylor defined by the triumphant resilience she shows the world, or the tragic burden she carries in the quiet hours of the night?
It's a heavy question.
Which brings us back to where we started. We always want healing to be immediate and binary, a potion swallowed, a bone mended.
Right.
But as Katherine's life shows us, true healing isn't a flick of the wand. Sometimes the deepest realization a healer can have is accepting that you cannot fix everything and choosing to live a life of service anyway.